There are decisions that look like endings. They arrive at the specific hour when the evidence has accumulated enough to make the conclusion seem inevitable, when the pattern of rejection has repeated itself enough times that the recognition of the pattern feels like wisdom rather than defeat. The decision to stop trying is, in these moments, not experienced as giving up. It is experienced as clarity, as the rational response to the available data, as the thing that a sensible person would have done some time ago if they had been paying attention. Marcus Webb had been paying attention. He was 26 years old in the autumn of 2003, and he had been paying attention for 5 years. 5 years of the specific work of attempting to become a working actor in Los Angeles. The auditions attended, the headshots updated, the acting classes continued, the sides prepared and memorized and delivered to the best of his ability in rooms that sometimes received them, and always, ultimately, sent him back out the door. 5 years of being told no in every form, that no takes when it is delivered by the machinery of an industry that says it is looking for something without being entirely sure what that something is until they find it, and that has not yet found it in Marcus Webb. He had not been idle. He had not been careless. He had done the work, the specific sustained work of someone who believes in what they are trying to do and who is willing to undergo the specific indignity of the audition process repeatedly, without the protection of bitterness, with the specific vulnerability of someone who keeps showing up because they still believe showing up matters. He had been showing up for 5 years. The email arrived on a Tuesday evening in October 2003. It was from the casting director of a production that Marcus had auditioned for 8 days earlier, a supporting role in a television pilot, the kind of role that, if it became a series, would provide the specific foothold that 5 years of auditions had been trying to establish. He had prepared thoroughly for the audition. He had done, by any honest assessment of his own work, well, he had left the audition room with the specific feeling rare enough in 5 years to be notable that the preparation had translated into the room, that what he had worked to achieve in the weeks before had actually been visible in the minutes of the audition itself. The email said, "Thank you for your time. We have gone in a different direction." He read it once. He read it again. He set the phone face down on his kitchen table. He sat for a while. He had been here before, had received versions of this message many times, had developed, across 5 years, the specific coping mechanisms of a person who regularly receives rejection and who needs the rejection to not destroy the capacity to continue. He knew the tools. He knew the recovery process. He had done it many times. But sitting at his kitchen table on the Tuesday evening in October 2003, he understood with a clarity that he had not felt before that the recovery process was not going to work this time. Not because this rejection was worse than the others, it was not, particularly, but because it had arrived at the specific moment when he had used up the internal resource from which the recovery drew. He had nothing left. He sat at the table for approximately 2 hours. Then he stood up, put on his jacket, and went outside, not with a destination, not with a plan, with the specific need for air and movement that the apartment, at that moment, could not provide. He walked. Los Angeles at night in October has a specific quality, the warmth that lingers after the day, the particular light of the streetlights on the specific surfaces of the city, the ambient sound of a city that does not fully quiet at night. He walked without direction through streets he knew and streets he did not know. He was not thinking about the email. He was not thinking about anything in particular. He was walking in the specific mode of someone who has been sitting with a large thing and needs the physical rhythm of movement to process what sitting with it has produced. He found himself, at approximately 10 in the evening, at a bar in a neighborhood he did not frequent. He did not drink heavily. He ordered a beer and sat at the end of the bar and was, in the specific way of a person who has been in their own head for several hours, simply somewhere that was not his apartment. He had been sitting for perhaps 20 minutes when someone sat down on the stool beside him. He did not look up immediately. He was looking at his beer. Then he became aware that the person beside him was looking at him, not the ambient awareness of a stranger in a bar, but a more specific, directed attention. He looked up. He recognized the face immediately. He had been recognizing that face his entire life, from films, from television, from the specific cultural omnipresence of someone who has been famous for long enough that their face becomes part of the furniture of the world you grew up in. He did not say anything immediately. The recognition and the moment and the specific state he was in produced a silence that lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Robin Williams said, "You look like you're having a night." Marcus looked at him. He said, "Yeah." Robin Williams said, "You want to talk about it, or you want to be left alone?" It was a genuine question, offered without assumption. Marcus considered it for a moment with the honest arithmetic of someone who had been in his own head for too long and who was, despite himself, grateful to have been addressed. He said, "I don't know. Maybe the first one." Robin Williams said, "All right." He ordered a drink. He settled onto the stool. He looked at Marcus with the specific quality of someone who has made a genuine offer and is prepared to make good on it. Marcus told him, not everything, not the 5 years in full, not every audition and every rejection in sequence, but the shape of it, the 5 years, the belief, the work, the email that evening, the 2 hours at the kitchen table, the specific quality of the feeling that had brought him out of his apartment and into this bar at 10 in the evening. He told him, "I think I'm done." Robin Williams did not respond immediately. He received the statement with the specific stillness of someone who has heard something that they are taking seriously. He said, "Done how?" Marcus said, "Done trying. Done with this. I've been doing it for 5 years and the answer is still no, and I think the reasonable thing, the sensible thing, is to accept that the answer is going to keep being no and stop putting myself through it." Robin Williams looked at him. He said, "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said, "Yeah." He said, "Those audition tapes from the past 5 years, the ones you made when you were preparing, do you still have them?" Marcus said, "Some of them, yeah." Robin Williams said, "Have you watched them recently?" Marcus said, "Not really." "What's the point?" Robin Williams said, "That's the question, isn't it?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I kept mine. Every bad audition, every rough take, every version of something that didn't land, I kept them. And when I was having the version of your night which I had, more than once I would go back and watch them. Not to torture myself, to see the distance." Marcus looked at him. Robin Williams said, "There's a version of you on those tapes from 5 years ago that doesn't know what the version of you sitting on that stool tonight knows. That version of you couldn't have walked into tonight's audition. And tonight's version of you couldn't have been made without 5 years of the tapes you want to stop making." He paused. He said, "The tape you made tonight, the one that produced the email, that produced the 2 hours at your kitchen table, and the walk, and this conversation, that tape is part of the tape that's going to be the one that works. You can't have that tape without this tape." Marcus was quiet. Robin Williams said, "The question isn't whether to stop making tapes. The question is whether you're willing to be the person who made this tape for long enough to become the person who makes the tape that matters." Marcus looked at his beer for a long time. He said, "What if that tape never comes?" Robin Williams said, "That's a fair question, and the honest answer is, I don't know. But I know that the version of you who decides tonight that it's over will never find out. And I think that would be a waste of a very good tape." They talked for another hour, about the craft, about the specific work of preparation and what it builds across years, about the difference between rejection that means stop and rejection that means not yet. Robin Williams did not promise Marcus that it would work. He did not offer assurances that the industry would eventually recognize what Marcus had. He spoke from the inside of his own experience, the specific, accumulated experience of someone who had been through the same arithmetic and come out the other side without making guarantees he could not keep. At some point, Marcus said, "Why are you still here? You could have just said goodnight when I looked up." Robin Williams looked at him. He said, "Because you looked like someone worth talking to, and because your night reminded me of a night I had, and I had someone buy me a drink and tell me something true. So, he shrugged. The shrug of someone completing a circuit, paying something forward in the specific way that things paid forward work. Not to the person they were received from, but to the next person who needs them. They said good night at approximately midnight. Marcus Webb walked home through the Los Angeles October night. He went to his apartment. He did not delete the tapes. He went to sleep. 6 months later, in the spring of 2004, Marcus Webb booked a guest role on a television series. It was not a large role, 2 episodes, a supporting part, the specific foothold that years of auditions had been working toward. He prepared for it with the same thoroughness he had brought to the auditions that had not worked. He delivered the work with the same commitment. He was present in the room in the way that he had been present in all the rooms. The production company called him back for 3 more episodes. By 2006, Marcus Webb had a recurring role on a series that ran for 4 seasons. By 2010, he had the kind of career that the 26-year-old sitting at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in October 2003 had been working toward. He has spoken, in interviews over the years, about the period of his career before it became what it became. He describes the years of auditions honestly, the work, the rejection, the accumulation of no. He describes the Tuesday evening in October 2003 with precision, the email, the kitchen table, the walk, the bar. He describes the conversation. He does not name the other person in the conversation. He has been asked. He declines. He says, only, someone bought me a drink and told me something true. And I didn't delete the tapes. He still has the tapes. All of them. Every audition, every rough take, every version of something that didn't land, going back to 1998. He keeps them the way the person who talked to him in the bar told him to keep them. Not to torture himself, but to see the distance. To watch the version of himself that didn't know what he knows now. To understand, in the specific, visible evidence of those tapes, what 5 years of working toward something produces, even when the working toward does not yet produce the thing itself. He keeps them because the tape that matters could not have been made without the tapes that didn't matter yet. That was true in October 2003. It is true now. It will be true for whatever tape comes next. He doesn't know what that tape will be. Neither did the person who told him to keep looking. But he is still here, still making tapes. That is enough. That is everything. There is something particular about the tape that doesn't work. Not the tape that fails spectacularly, not the audition where nothing goes right, where the preparation dissolves under the pressure of the room, and the result is obviously and visibly bad. The tape that is hardest to keep is the tape that almost worked. The tape where the preparation was genuine, where the presence in the room was real, where the work that was done translated into what was shown, and where the result was still no. The tape that leaves the question, if not this, then what? Marcus Webb had made that tape in October 2003. He had prepared thoroughly. He had been present in the room. The work had translated. The answer was still no. And he had been asked, by someone who had no particular obligation to ask, to see that tape differently. Not as the evidence that the no was final. As the evidence that the tape was getting closer to the tape that would receive a different answer. He had been asked to see the distance. In the bar, on the Tuesday night in October 2003, what Robin Williams gave Marcus Webb was not a promise. It was not a guarantee. It was not the specific, false comfort of someone telling a person in distress what they want to hear. It was something considerably less comfortable and considerably more useful, the permission to see his own trajectory as a trajectory, rather than as a series of discrete rejections. The 5 years were not 5 years of failing. They were 5 years of the tape getting closer to the tape that would work. The audition that produced the email that produced the 2 hours at the kitchen table, that audition was not the end of the line. It was the most recent point on a line that had been moving, consistently, in a direction. This is the thing that is very difficult to see from inside the experience of rejection. Rejection, experienced from the inside, feels static. It feels like a judgment on a fixed quantity, this person, these tapes, this work, rather than on a point in a process. The email says, "We have gone in a different direction." It does not say, "You are currently at the 47th tape of a career that will require 60 before it begins to open." It says no in the way that feels final, even when it isn't. The person who had made the offer to talk in the bar at 10 in the evening in October had been through the arithmetic. He had sat at his own version of the kitchen table. He had made his own version of the walk. He had been in his own version of the bar, and someone, some specific person on some specific night, had bought him a drink and told him something true. He did not know, when he sat down on the stool beside Marcus, that he was paying it forward. He was simply responding to the specific fact of a young man sitting at the end of a bar on a Tuesday night who looked like he was having a night. The response was, "You want to talk about it, or you want to be left alone?" The rest followed from the answer. Marcus has thought about that question many times across the 20 years since. Not the things that were said afterward, the conversation about tapes, the specific truth that was offered, the hour of talking about the craft and the work, and the specific arithmetic of a career. But the initial question, the one that made the rest possible, "You want to talk about it, or you want to be left alone?" The question gave him the choice. It did not assume that talking was what he needed. It did not assume that being left alone was what he needed. It simply held both options open and let him decide which one he needed. He needed to talk. He knows, across 20 years, that he might have said, "I want to be left alone." He might have said it because that is sometimes the true answer, and sometimes it is the answer that feels safer than the alternative. He might have turned back to his beer, and the person on the stool beside him might have said, "All right, good night," and the conversation would not have happened, and the tapes would perhaps have been deleted, and the foothold of 6 months later would perhaps not have been reached. He did not say he wanted to be left alone. He said, "Maybe the first one," and the rest followed. He has been careful, in the years of his career, to create the conditions in which younger people in his industry can have something like that conversation when they need it. Not specifically, he is not in the habit of sitting down beside strangers in bars and asking if they want to talk about it, but in the more ordinary ways that people with access pay things forward. The time given, the honest conversation offered, the specific willingness to speak from the inside of experience rather than from the outside of advice. He learned this from a Tuesday night in October 2003. He learned it from the bar, and from the question, and from the hour that followed the question. He learned it from, "The tape you made tonight is part of the tape that's going to be the one that works." He has said this to people. Not in those words. He does not reproduce the conversation, has not reproduced it in 20 years, except in the vague terms of the interview answers. But in the substance of it, the thing that was given to him on that Tuesday night has been given, in various forms, to other people in various contexts across the 20 years since. The circuit continues. That is how circuits work. Someone buys you a drink and tells you something true. You don't delete the tapes. The tape that matters eventually arrives. And at some point, in some bar, in some city, you find yourself sitting beside someone who looks like they're having a night, and you ask, "You want to talk about it, or you want to be left alone?" And the circuit completes itself and begins again. Marcus Webb is still making tapes. He has been making them for 25 years. The tapes from 1998 are still in his possession, kept, as he was told to keep them, to see the distance. He watches them sometimes. He watches the version of himself that did not know what he knows now, doing the work that he did not yet know how to do, in rooms that were not yet ready to receive it. He watches the distance. He thinks about Tuesday nights. He thinks about, "I don't know if that tape will ever come, but the version of you who decides tonight that it's over will never find out." He found out. He is still finding out. That is the tape. That is all of it. Robin Williams died in August 2014. Marcus Webb heard the news in the morning, between a production meeting and a table read, on a day that was otherwise entirely ordinary. He sat with it for a while before the table read began. He did not tell the room what he was sitting with. He went into the table read and did the work. The way that you do the work on the days when the work and the life are happening in the same space, and you have to hold both. After the table read, he went to his office. He looked at the files on his computer. He found the folder that contains the audition tapes going back to 1998. He opened it. He did not watch all of them. He watched the tape from October 2003, the audition that had produced the email that had produced the 2 hours at the kitchen table, and the walk and the bar. He watched himself in the room, the preparation, the work, the specific quality of a 26-year-old who had been doing this for 5 years and who was doing it as well as he knew how to do it at the point he was at in October 2003. He watched the tape. He saw the distance. He thought about, you can't have that tape without this tape. He thought about, the version of you who decides tonight that it's over will never find out. He thought about a Tuesday night in October 2003 and a stool at the end of a bar and a question that was asked without assumption and that he answered with, maybe the first one. He closed the folder. He went back to work. The tapes are still there. All of them. He has not deleted any of them. He never will.